Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people seem to care more about certain things than others? And why those certain things can be so different from person to person or even culture to culture? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that tackles exactly this question. It's about the hierarchy of moral concern, which basically means the order in which we tend to care about different beings or things in the world. Think about it. We naturally feel more strongly about our family than a stranger, and most of us care about animals more than a pile of rocks. But just how different are these priorities across the globe, and from person to person, that is what this research investigates. Scientists have noticed that there is a pretty common pattern in how people rank their moral concerns. Usually, it looks something like this. We care most about our family and friends, then about people in our own country or group, then about people from other countries, followed by animals, and then the environment. At the very bottom, we often have, well, villains. This study wanted to see if this pattern, which was mostly found in places like the United States, the UK, and Australia, holds true everywhere else. So how did they do it? They took a really big existing data set with over 6,500 university students from 41 different cultural groups around the world. Imagine getting to ask people from so many different places about what matters to them morally. They used a special questionnaire called the Moral Expansiveness Scale. This scale asks people to rate how much moral concern they feel for 30 different things, which are grouped into 10 categories. These categories include things like family and friends, in-group members, like co-workers, respected figures, stigmatized groups, people from other countries, very sentient animals like chimpanzees, the environment, less sentient animals like fish, plants, and finally, villains. Participants rated each of these 30 items on a simple 4-point scale, from 0 meaning no moral concern at all, to 3 meaning the highest level of moral concern. The researchers then averaged these ratings for each of the 10 groups for each person. Now, for the results. The first big finding was that overall there is a lot of similarity in how people across these 41 cultures rank their moral concerns. In almost every single group, family and friends came out on top, getting the highest scores for moral concern. And at the bottom, villains generally received the lowest scores. This basic structure of caring most about those close to us and least about those considered bad actors seems to be pretty universal. To get a clearer picture of how similar the hierarchies were, they looked at 13 specific comparisons that were consistently found in previous studies. For example, does family and friends rank higher than in-group members? Does the environment rank higher than low sentience animals? They counted how many of these 13 rankings were the same in each of the 41 cultural groups. And guess what? On average, 11 out of 13 of these rankings were the same across all the groups. This is pretty remarkable. 12 of the cultural groups fully replicated the typical hierarchy. They also found something interesting when they looked at how similar each culture was to the United States, where much of the initial research was done. The study found that cultures that were more similar to the US tended to have a moral hierarchy that was more like the one seen in US studies. Conversely, cultures that were more different from the US showed a moral hierarchy that was a bit less similar. This suggests that cultural context does play a role, but the overall pattern is still very strong. They also pinpointed which specific comparisons were the most universal. The top 3 rankings that held true in all 41 cultural groups were caring more about family and friends than in-group members, caring more about the environment than low sentience animals, and caring more about the environment than plants. That's really telling, isn't it? We all seem to have a core set of moral priorities that cross cultural lines. Now, the study also looked at differences not just between countries, but between individuals within those countries. While their country-level findings showed a lot of similarity, looking at individuals revealed something else. If you look at each person's individual responses, the median number of the 13 typical rankings that matched was 7 out of 13. This means that while there is a general pattern, individual people can and do vary quite a bit in their personal moral hierarchies. It is not as uniform at the individual level as it is when you average everyone together in a culture. This important finding highlights that just because a country as a whole shows a certain pattern on average doesn't mean every single person in that country agrees. They gave an example where one country showed all 13 rankings matching the typical pattern when looking at averages, but when they looked at individuals, there were significant differences in how people ranked certain groups, like villains versus plants. This means looking only at group averages can sometimes hide the diversity of individual moral landscapes. Now, let's talk about some of the limitations and what this research can't quite tell us. While the study did an amazing job with 41 countries, the samples were all university students. This means they're likely younger, more educated, and possibly more liberal than the general population in their countries. The researchers suggest that if they had surveyed the general population, they might have seen even bigger cultural differences. Also, the way they grouped certain targets, like stigmatized targets, refugees, LGBT individuals, mentally challenged individuals, might be interpreted differently in various cultures, even if the overall scale is generally understood. So, what is the big takeaway here? This study provides strong evidence that the basic structure of our moral world, who and what we prioritize, is remarkably similar across many cultures. While there are definitely cultural nuances, especially when comparing to the United States, the core idea of prioritizing loved ones in group members and then gradually extending concern outwards seems to be a widely shared human trait. It is a powerful reminder of our shared humanity. This research opens up so many more questions. For example, why do some cultures show slightly different patterns? Like where villains fall in the hierarchy? What specific societal factors might influence these small but meaningful differences? And on an individual level, what makes one person prioritize the environment over humans, while another does the opposite? These are the kinds of fascinating questions that this study sets the stage for, encouraging more exploration into the rich tapestry of human morality across the globe. Thank you for joining me today on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this as interesting as I did and want to dive deeper into the science of our minds, please hit that like button. Leave a comment with your thoughts. And subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration. See you next time.